Good afternoon. We are team number 6 and we are going to present a simulated scenario between our chosen country, Korea, and Germany. The case starts between 1998 and 2004 when Hyundai Motor Company and Daimler Chrysler entered a strategic alliance in which Daimler acquired approximately 10% of Hyundai. The context was the Asian financial crisis of 1997, which left Korean conglomerates vulnerable and in need of external capital. Hyundai was seeking funding and access to advanced engineering technology, while Daimler wanted to enter the Asian market and secure lower cost manufacturing base. However, disagreements over the degree of control Daimler would have in management, the speed and scope of technology transfer, and the way internal decisions would be made gradually deteriorated the relationship until Daimler completely exited the investment in 2004 without having obtained the strategic benefits it had expected, while Hyundai retained its independence and eventually established itself as a strong global brand. The important factors in this case are high and low context communication, attitude toward conflict, and control, hierarchy, and autonomy. The important points in this case are what happened during this case, a strategic alliance in which Daimler Chrysler acquired approximately 10% of Hyundai Motor Company, seeking market access and manufacturing advantage, while Hyundai sought capital and advanced technology. Who participated in this case? We have Hyundai Motor Company, which is South Korea, and Daimler Chrysler AG, Germany. When did this happen? Between 1998 and 2004. And where did it happen? The alliance operated across South Korea and Germany with joint projects spanning both markets.
Then we have the objectives. The objectives of Hyundai was to secure urgent capital after the 97 and 98 Asian financial crisis severely weakened Korean conglomerates. Also gain access to Daimler's advanced engineering and powertrain technology to close the gap with Japanese and European competitors, and to boost global brand credibility through association with a prestigious German automaker. The objectives of Daimler Chrysler was to expand into high-road Asian automotive markets as European markets were becoming saturated. Also leverage Hyundai's lower-cost manufacturing base to improve margins and to generate financial returns from its 10% equity stake in Hyundai. The interest of Hyundai Motor Company was to preserve family and national control. The chaebol identity was non-negotiable. No foreign partner could influence internal decisions. Also absorb Daimler's technology as fast as possible without becoming dependent on the long term, and to use the alliance as leverage to strengthen its competitive position against Toyota and Honda. The interest of Daimler Chrysler was to exercise real managerial influence, not just hold a passive financial stake, to protect proprietary technology from being absorbed without receiving equivalent value in return, and to reinforce its image as a global automotive integrator capable of managing cross-cultural alliances. The core tension was that Hyundai wanted knowledge and capital while keeping full autonomy, and Daimler wanted control and protection while gaining market access. Neither side was fully transparent about those priorities, which ultimately led to the alliance collapse in 2004.
Okay, we see where South Korea falls in the negotiation chart. Hyundai falls into the emotionally unexpressive quadrant and avoids confrontation. This means that throughout the entire negotiation with Daimler, the Korean team never openly displayed their emotions or confronted conflicts hand on. Instead of saying we disagree, they simply agree at the table with resistance in practice. Everything was very calculated, very controlled. Okay, here we see Germany's position, which falls into the emotionally unexpressive but confrontational quadrant. Daimler wasn't emotional either, but unlike Hyundai, they did say directly that they wanted and what they would not accept. If there was a disagreement, they put it on the table without beating around the bush. For them, that was simply being professional and clear, not disrespectful. This slide shows the two countries side by side, although both they were emotionally unexpressive, they were so for completely different reasons. Hyundai was not expressive because in Korean culture, showing emotions during a negotiation is perceived as a loss of harmony and can cause public embarrassment for either party. So calmness was a strategic tool. Daimler was not expressive because within its German professional culture, emotionally neutrally simply means that you are serious and get to the point. It has nothing to do with relationships or preserving anything. On the other hand, there was also a huge difference in the level of confrontation. Hyundai avoided confrontation because in Korean culture, disagreements are not expressed directly on the table, but are handled through internal channels with subtle signals, and consensus is built before and position is expressive outwardly. Daimler was confrontational because for them, raising a disagreement directly is not a sign of disrespect. Of the contrary, it is a sign of clarity and that the negotiation is serious. If there was a problem, they would say so, debate it, and hope to resolve it right then and there. What for Daimler was simply big direct, for Hyundai felt like pressure and impatience, and that generated friction that neither side was able to recognize in time. The problem was whenever Hyundai remained silent or agreed to something. Daimler interpreted it as meaning that everything was fine and that an agreement had been reached when Hyundai had already decided internally that it would not follow through on it. That gap in interpretation was one of the main reasons the alliance failed.
Next, we'll discuss proving for underlying interest, where we'll analyze in more detail the interest of Hyundai Motor Company, that is, and her counterparty Daimler Chrysler. First, there is the table of our interest as Hyundai Motor Company, South Korea. First, we have our explicit interest with a value of 35 points. The first is capital infusion and financial survival. The Asian financial crisis threatened Hyundai's solvency. Survival required external validation, but on Hyundai's own terms, never under foreign control. The second is access to advanced German technology, powertrain, and manufacturing. To close the quality gap with Japanese rivals, Toyota and Honda, and eventually compete in the global premium segment, learning without becoming a technological vassal of Daimler. The third is global brand credibility through the partnership with Daimler. For what purpose? The partnership with Daimler signal world-class quality to international buyers and investors, repositioning Hyundai from a cheap Korean car to a serious global contender. Secondly, our underlying interest with a value of 30 points. The first is persevering the Chung family table identify and control. The Chung family control over Hyundai is not a matter of personal preference, it's the foundation of the company organizational culture, its decision-making speed, and Korean
national identify. Losing control equal losing identify. The second is absorbing knowledge without creating technological dependence. Hyundai long-term plan was to use the alliance as a one-time technology transfer and to compete independently depends was the enemy. And finally, we have your tactical interest worth 35 points. The first is strengthening market position against Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Japanese manufacturers dominate the same emerging market that Hyundai was targeting. The credibility of German engineering was a differentiator that Hyundai could build in-house in time, so it borrowed Daimler brand's equity. And the second is protect national prestige and the post-crisis narrative. And for what purpose? The Korean government and labor unions were watching a failed or subordinate alliance while signal industrial weekends. And the third is expand your commercial vehicle lineup. A commercial vehicle offer faster market entry to passenger cars and a clear joint venture structure with Daimler. This gave Hyundai a visible, low-risk success story to showcase domestically. Now we're going to talk about the table of interest of the counterparty, which is Daimler Chrysler. First, there are explicit interests. The first is entry into Asian automotive markets. European markets were saturated. Asia represents the next major wave of growth in automotive sales. Hyundai crisis provide a low-cost entry point into market that Daimler could not penetrate organically. The second is low-cost Korean manufacturer base. German labor costs were among the highest in the world. Using Hyundai plants to produce commercial vehicles allowed Daimler to remain competitive in price-sensitive segments without compromising German labor agreements. And the third is financial return on a 10% equity stake. For what purpose? Return on capital was secondary. The stakes was the mechanism for gaining governance, influence, and access to the board. Second, share underlying interest. The first is management, influence, and actual governance rights. Why? Daimler board and institutional investor require tangible oversight metric. For example, structured reports, access to audit, joint decision-making rights. And the second is protecting German proprietary IP related to broadcasting of Hyundai. Daimler tips fair that Hyundai will absorb Germany engineering, leave the alliance, and compete directly in the premium segment. And finally, third tactical interest. The first is a stronger image as a global automotive supplier. Following the merge with Chrysler, Daimler need to project a credible global strategic. A Korean alliance reinforces the global car narrative among investors and analysts. And finally, diversify risk beyond mature European markets. For what purpose? European automotive cycles, we are tied to the same macroeconomic variables. Asia fair counter-cyclical exposure. When European demand fell, spending by the rising Asian middle class could offset it. Hyundai was the vehicle for that edge.
Okay, the second negotiation resource is identify relevant stakeholders. This slide shows the stakeholders who were directly visible in the negotiation, those who had a clear role recognized by both parties. On Hyundai side, first we have the Chong family and Hyundai's executive leadership who led the entire negotiation seeking external capital during the Asian financial crisis. access to advanced technology, and international legitimacy to the partnership with Daimler. Their influence was high because, as a chaebol structure, the founding family had real power over any terms related to the company's internal control. Without their approval, no agreement was possible. We also have Hyundai's technical and manufacturing teams, who were the direct recipients of the engineering knowledge that Hyundai sought to absorb as quickly as possible to the alliance. Their influence was medium high because although they were not the negotiating table, the actual success of the entire alliance depend on how quickly they could assimilate German technology without becoming dependent on it, which was precisely Hyundai's central implicit objective. On the Daimler side, first we have the executive leadership and negotiating team of Daimler, who led the negotiations to acquire an 10% equity stake in Hyundai, seeking real strategic influence, low-cost manufacturing, and presence in the Asian market. Their influence was high because, as the party initially, the investment, they set the pace and financial terms on the entire negotiation, and their insistence on obtaining control and transparency was the main point of friction with Hyundai. We also have the Daimler shareholders who expect a clear return on their investment and risk diversification outside European markets. Their influence was medium because, although they did not participate directly in the sessions, their profitability expectations set the limits of what the executive team could concede without having to justify it internally. And next, in this slide, discuss the stakeholders who were not at the table but who did influence how things unfolded. On Hyundai's side, first we have the South Korean government, which did not negotiate directly but did shape the political and industrial environment in which Hyundai operates, with clear interests in economic stability, job preservation, and the strengthening of large national conglomerates. Its influence was medium high because its implicit support for the Chaebol as strategic national companies determined how much Hyundai could concede in terms of control without compromising its political standing within the country. We also have the Korean labor unions, which were not present at any negotiation session, but any decision regarding operational restructuring of chains to the production line directly affected them. Their influence was medium because although they could not formally block the agreement, they could erode internal public support and complicate implementation if they perceived that the alliance treated employing or national operational autonomy. On Daimler side, first we have Daimler Engineering and Joint Projects teams, which were responsive for executing technology transfer agreement for commercial vehicles, defining what knowledge to share and what piece and under what conditions, while always ensuring that Daimler's core intellectually property remaining protected. Their influence was medium because their decision on what to share and what to withhold directly affect the progress on the entire alliance. We also have the global competitors, especially the Japanese in the automotive sector, who, who were not part on the negotiation but closely observed the results on this alliance as a strategic benchmark. This influence was medium because the presence as external observers created an additional incentive for both parties not to show weakness or concede on terms that could be interpreted as competitive vulnerability.
Okay, now we have the outcomes and alternatives. So, what actually happened? The alliance dissolved after 6 years. Chrysler exited its stake in Hyundai with limited strategic gain, and Hyundai retained full independence and later emerged as a strong global player. So, what could have gone differently? First, separate the money from the power. If both sides have been upfront early on that financial investment, operational control, a lot of the friction could have been avoided altogether. Go slow to go fast. A phased approach to technology sharing tied to actual milestones will have built the trust needed for deeper cooperation instead of constant stalling. Get a cultural bridge in the room. Not a translator, but someone who actually understands both sides well enough to catch what's being said versus what's being meant. Next one, please. Thank you. Badna action plan. Takeaways worth remembering. Nail down that partnership actually means before signing anything. It means something very different in Seoul than in Stuttgart. Silence in the room is not a green light, especially in high context cultures. So, when financial and operational agreements blur together, things get messy fast. And a cultural go between isn't a nice to have, it's part of the deal structure. So, now Daimler's action plan shift focus to other Asian partners. They already had a stake in Mitsubishi, expand in China through existing joint ventures instead. They exited, but they left without the foothold they came for. Now we have Hyundai's action plan. Find another Western partner willing to play by different rules, double down on internal R&D and reduce reliance on outside technology. Lean on government backing as a strategic national asset. In the end, walking away was a win. They grew globally on their own terms.
Finally, we have 5 recommendations. The first is the respect the table structure. Control is non-negotiable. The 10% equity stake is a financial investment, not a ticket to executive power. The Jun family makes the decisions. The second is never a first whole try. Protect the relationship and buy time. When faced with intrusive demands, respond with calculated ambiguity. We'll discuss in internally protects the relationship and buy times. The third is flexibility in form, firmness in substance. Conceding on joint venture timelines and models builds trust without compromising autonomy and technology transfer. The fourth is maintain a position of power even in the crisis suggests otherwise, always position the alliance as opportunity for the Daimler, not as a bailout for Hyundai. And finally, zero direct confrontation. Disagreement is expressed silent. Zero direct confrontation pauses an open question instead of visible frustration. And thank you.